We've got almost everybody joined in there, Wade.
Excellent. Well, thanks so much for joining us today. I'm Wade Cropet, our California Natural Resources Secretary. I'm actually in the field today visiting volunteers who are helping manage vaccination sites. I hope everybody is safe and healthy today. And I know we're all excited with the surge of vaccines across the state and the return toward normalcy here in coming months. Science is the basis of everything we do at the Natural Resources Agency. And as we face really unprecedented challenges like climate change and biodiversity, it's our scientists who lead the way in helping us understand these threats and craft solutions to protect people and nature from the threats. Recognizing the role of scientists in all of our work in state agencies, we're very excited to launch this new series called the Science Exchange, which is all about building the public dialogue around the science that we're doing in the agency and the scientists who are doing it. And so I'm really excited to kick off this series with what is a very important conversation, specifically focused on elevating the role of women in science and women scientists in our agency. And in just a moment, I'll be able to introduce my partner in all things at the agency to lead this discussion. But I want to just acknowledge the fact that while we are focused on achieving equity and diversity and inclusion in our agency, we recognize that our institutions that have relied on science have not upheld those principles historically, and that there is a legacy of discrimination, sexual harassment, unconscious bias across the field of science. I was so moved by the movie called Picture a Scientist that many of us got to watch this week, that really detailed the tremendous challenges that talented female scientists have had historically, and importantly, what we need to do to ensure that we're bringing the best and brightest female scientists into the work of our institutions. So today we're going to unpack those issues in a clear and direct way with some of our all-star scientists in the agency. I'm really pleased to introduce as moderator Angela Barranco, who is Undersecretary of our agency, trained as a conservation biologist, and my partner on all that we're doing in the agency. So let me turn it over to you, Angela.
Thank you so much, Wade. And really so excited to be here with all of you today and to launch our inaugural Science Exchange. It's just so exciting. And of course, on the heels of International Women's Day from earlier this week, but also this whole month of Women's History Month, really thinking about the contribution of women across the board, but specifically for our agency and for our conversation today, Women in Science. And so we have a nice, agenda we've set out for this wonderful discussion, which I'll tell you a little bit about, and we have some incredible panelists. So really stay tuned. Just a little bit of orientation for folks who want to ask a question. Please feel free to click on that button at the bottom that says Q&A. Feel free to send your questions in now or as the conversation gets rolling. We really want to hear from you, and I'm excited to keep this conversation with all of you also. So without further ado, welcome to our wonderful conversation. We have three incredible scientists from our agency who are joining us here today. And as part of this discussion, we had the opportunity to see an incredible film called Picture a Scientist. And so we're going to kick it off just by showing you the trailer for the film, just for folks who are interested. It tells the story of three female scientists and some of the challenges and some of the real institutional questions that we have to think about as we support our work every single day. And then we're going to spend a little time talking with our scientists and a little bit of conversation and Q&A with all of you. So without further ado, I'll kick us off to our trailer so we can go ahead and see that part of the film.
This genetics, this molecular biology, that was the answer to all the questions I'd ever had about everything. We were just trying to be scientists. We certainly didn't want to be seen as troublemakers.
People said, what happens in the field stays in the field. It was bullying from day one. He would tell me women were altering the science on the ice for worse.
What's going to happen if I report him? What happens if I don't report him? It was getting really physical.
I didn't tell anybody because who's going to believe you? You know, nobody.
Women are extraordinarily underrepresented in science.
When you ask somebody, draw a picture of a scientist, it used to be all men.
There's a playbook, and it was written by men. And I always felt I didn't have the playbook. I'm just feeling my way through this game.
You get used to being underestimated. You get used to being invisible.
These are great scientists. How can they not believe this?
Many of the women that I've spoken to have left.
This is the Leaky Pipeline.
They cannot say the evidence doesn't exist.
So I thought, okay, I have to show them it's true. So I wrote, there's a kind of systemic and invisible discrimination against women. Can we really afford to lose those top scientists?
He just needs to look at the data. That's what he'd want us to do for his science.
You cannot do everything on your own. You need enough of your allies to make something happen.
I expected to fight alone. I didn't expect anybody else to fight with me.
Together, we can do better.
Let's move away from a culture of compliance and towards a culture of change.
If you don't have women, you've lost half the best people. Look at the talent of these women. This is worth fighting for.
So for everyone who's interested, we'll drop into the chat function if you'd like to check out the film. We highly recommend it. And so, as part of this inaugural science exchange, we actually, as an agency, were able to share a screening of this incredible movie with our teams. And so, part of that has really, I think, given us a lot to talk about today. So without further ado, though, I do want to spend a little bit of time with our, esteemed science colleagues talking about their incredible work, because I think part of this opportunity of the Science Exchange is really to elevate the work that is happening in our agency and the science of policy making and all the different ways that people are contributing throughout our wonderful agency. So I'll start off with me, and I, again, Angela Barranco, I'm the undersecretary, and though I am trained as a conservation biologist, really I've spent most of my career more in the political and in governmental space. But so then I will tell the story of my scientist that I think of. So, the title of this movie really struck me immediately because when I picture a scientist, I picture my mom. I'm gonna get a little choked up. But my mom is a pharmaceutical chemist by training, and you can see here, very reminiscent of some of the stories that were told in this incredible movie about pioneers of women really, in a time when it was a very male-dominated field. And so I love these pictures because you can see, in her graduating class, she's one of just 3 women. In the lower right, you can see a picture of them in their classroom. And, it's a sea of men with just a handful of women in the very front. But she had an incredible career. She's retired now. I think she's actually watching this right now today. And as a pharmaceutical chemist, had an incredible opportunity to help with the science behind the health of millions and millions of people in this country. So really proud of her work, but also really aware of some of the challenges and some of the barriers, not only as a woman in science, but also a woman of color in science, and especially an immigrant. She would often tell me stories about, when she first arrived and she was working in a lab, and, her male, boss would have a huge cigar in his mouth and would not, bother to speak slower or to, explain anything. He just would mumble his way through stuff. And, my mom trying to figure out not just a new language, a new culture, but also, a new workplace scenario. So, the challenges are pretty numerous. But I think when I picture a scientist, I picture my mom. And you can see in the upper right corner, there's a picture of me actually visiting the lab with my mom. I'm the one drinking out of a coffee cup, taking in the breadth and scope of the types of women who were already represented. So you could see many different types of women who were a part of her field and a part of her lab. But, so next slide. I too was a scientist. I will say, this is a picture of me. I joke, you have to figure out which one of these very, very well covered up folks it is. I'm actually the one second from the left, standing next to, or sitting with my notebook next to my colleague who's standing in the red. So this was me doing field work, doing an ecological survey of dolphins in Buenos Aires, just outside of Buenos Aires. And, for me, just understanding the love and passion of science that I got from my mom really, gave me such an incredible opportunity to think of the world in this incredible way. And so when, I started thinking about what I wanted to do for my career, I originally started in molecular biology and then worked my way into conservation biology. Just when I realized how amazing and incredible everything was connected, and really the calling to think about climate change and all these different things that we do at Natural Resources Agency, protecting our natural resources every day, was just too great a mission for us to be able to, for me not to be a part of. And so I've had an incredible journey from scientist into policymaker, and I'm so thankful to be able to introduce this panel. So that's my quick story. But what I want to do also is sort of tee up the incredible panelists we have today. And so what I'll ask our panelists is just to spend a quick minute telling everybody who you are, how you got here, show us a picture of you from when you were, if you have one, an early scientist, but then really give us a good sense of the work you're doing today and the incredible science and contribution that you've had to our agency. So I'm going to kick it over to Melinda Bearwald, who I think who will be our first panelist, and she's an environmental program manager with the Department of Water Resources.
Okay, thanks, Angela. So yeah, I work as an environmental program manager within the Division of Environmental Services at DWR. And as part of the Interagency Ecological Program, I'm lucky because I get to work with scientists and managers from a lot of the state and federal departments to cooperatively research and monitor the San Francisco estuary. I'm the program manager for the development of a new estuarine research station, which will be bringing together over 200 scientists from multiple state and federal departments to work collaboratively side by side together. And so that's really exciting for us. And I also provide project oversight and mentorship for staff on scientific studies to inform or comply with mandates for continued water operations. And this includes use of custom designed delta smelt enclosures to test the effectiveness of managed actions aimed at helping the species and assisting with the upcoming supplementation of captive delta smelt into the wild. We often say that these enclosures are more designed for the species than any enclosures have ever been designed for a single species before. We've thought about them and what their needs are because they're the most sensitive species you could ever imagine. And additionally, in collaboration with UC Davis and MIT, we're developing a new rapid field deployable genetic tool for ecological species identification based on CRISPR technology. This last project exemplifies the type of work that really excites me because it transfers an incredibly innovative technology into a new field, in this case, ecology. And I truly believe that it has the potential to change the way that we conduct genetic monitoring for greater efficiency improvements and making genetic information more accessible to field biologists to ultimately aid in the conservation of threatened and endangered species as a whole. And combining that with working on it with collaborators that are super smart, motivated, and genuinely nice people. And I'm a really happy scientist. And that's all I've got.
Thank you so much, Melinda. And I think we should pull up that slide again. And Melinda, tell us what those pictures are of you, just so we can get a sense.
Got it. Okay, so the one where I'm pointing is me in a classroom at a middle school in Rio Vista. So we've started an educational outreach program for middle school students to teach them about the Bay Delta ecology. I think this is really important. This actually speaks to the idea of, there's been a recent study, I think it was by Microsoft, that showed that a lot of girls get really interested in science around age 11. And by age 15, they aren't so interested in science anymore. And part of that has to do with them not having role models, scientific role models. And so getting out there, and because we're public agencies, getting out there and interacting with the public, I think is a really important part of what we should be doing, and sharing our work with them. And so this is a way of interacting with the community and sharing the good work that we're doing. The middle picture there above my name is going with some state water contractors out on a boat to share with them some of the work that we're doing. This was for the Delta smelt cages. And so that one is trying to teach our stakeholders basically why we believe that the work that we're doing is important and why they should support us in that. And then on the right-hand side there, I'm in this big puffy coat, and it's that one is just me putting out Delta smelt into the water. And then at the bottom, that's in the lab processing samples, Delta smelt samples actually. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Melinda.
Thank you.
Love those pictures, and incredible to hear all about all of your work. So the next person I have the pleasure to introduce is Julie Yamamoto. She is Senior Deputy Administrator for the Office of Spill Prevention and Response at the Department of Fish and Wildlife.
Julie, you're muted. You need to unmute yourself.
So thanks for inviting me to this panel. Thank you, Angela. Yeah, again, my name is Julie Yamamoto. I'm a Deputy Administrator with the Office of Spill Prevention and Response, which is a mouthful, so it's also known as OSPR within the Department of Fish and Wildlife. And at OSPR, I directly oversee the technical and scientific programs there, and there's a lot that goes on at OSPR. I guess I'll step back. So OSPR is responsible for responding to oil spills to water throughout the state. And when we are not responding, we are doing lots of preparedness and training, prevention work, and also ecological restoration that follows in the wake of spills. So I, in my position, even though I'm less hands-on with the science at this point, I really love the variety of the work that we do, and I get to be sort of engaged and touch a lot of different topics. Everything from GIS technology and drones to sea otter medicine to how do you measure how clean is clean following a spill, to how do you restore a rare seabird because after a bunch of them have been killed by a spill. So it's really a never-ending variety, and I love being engaged on it, and really all the excellent scientists that I get to work with, and many other classifications that make up our team. Just a little bit about my background. I got into science because as a kid, ever since I can remember, I've been fascinated by and loved wildlife and animals, just the natural world, and watched all the Wild Kingdom shows and all the Jane Goodall specials. And so fast forward 20 years or so, I got a master's degree in avian biology and a PhD in environmental toxicology from UC Davis. And, excuse me. And I have actually spent my entire career with the state. I started fresh out of grad school, working for the Office of Environmental Health Hazard Assessment at Cal EPA, and stayed there for about 5 years. It wasn't the best fit for me as a person interested in natural resources. So I was fortunate to have been recruited by a CDFW supervisor that I knew, and who encouraged me to apply at the department, which I did. And I didn't make it the first time, so I was determined, and I applied a second time and got in. So I came to OSPR in about 2000. And I was a senior toxicologist there for a while, and then was encouraged to move up to management, and have been in a CEA position there since about 2007 in various titles. And I want to say that, you know, it's regarding leadership and moving up as a scientist. It was not an easy decision. And I get that for scientists that may not want to move up, but I thought about the importance of bringing science to policy and decision-making and law, and making sure the work that scientists do gets used appropriately and responsibly. So that kind of helped me decide to move up to management. And I understand it's not for everyone, but for me, it's been very rewarding as a pathway. So I think I'll wrap up there. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Julie. And what a wonderful story. And last, I'm going to introduce Portia Halbert. She's a senior environmental scientist at California State Parks. Oh, actually, but Julie, we should let Julie introduce her photos. I apologize. And then.
Oh, I can't see them. Oh, they're there.
There you go.
Oh, this is a smattering. One in the top left corner, I'm actually, I think there I was introducing the Science Institute team. We got a director's award that year for starting an initiative to advance science in the department and improve support for scientists. There's a few field photos there. One is me on a pelican release. Endangered pelican. I was invited by the International Bird Rescue Organization to come down and help release the pelican, which is always really fun and gratifying to see. The lower left is me on a spill quite a while ago called the Lukenbach, where an old sunken vessel actually was sporadically, chronically oiling beaches and birds, and in the San Francisco Bay Area. And then the upper right is actually me at a large spill in the Central Valley that we had. It was a site called Simric, the Simric oil field, and that's kind of a new kind of spill we've been responding to. They're called surface expressions. So that was us doing a quick site visit out there. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Julie. And now we can kick it over to Portia.
Hi, thank you, Angela, for the introduction. I'm honored to be speaking to you all today. I had a pre-planned camping trip, so I'm here at Pinnacles National Park, and I hope that my Zoom connection holds. I am currently, as Angela said, a senior environmental scientist for the Santa Cruz District of California State Parks. And I want to tell you a little bit about how I got here. I went to school in the desert at Arizona State University and received my Bachelor of Science degree in environmental resources with an emphasis in ecology. I came to Santa Cruz to check out PhD programs at UCSC with my partner 20 years ago. I looked at a map and I saw all of this green space and open area, parks, forest, ocean, and I felt that I could really fit in here. And my foot in the door job was working at a kiosk at Henry Cowell Redwood State Park, checking in campers. And during my breaks, I would take walks in the park. And I was overwhelmed with and truly fell in love with the greenery, the lush landscape, the coastal redwoods, the fog, mushrooms, ferns. I found that there was a resource management program. And as soon as the camping season ended, I transitioned over to the natural resource management crew that does that boots on the ground natural resource management work, working outside in different parks every day, and most days were different. A few might be spent working on invasive plant removal, like cutting down eucalyptus trees, removing French broom, jubata, English ivy, vinca, and so many others. Then we would be installing symbolic fencing to protect the western snowy plover habitat. And then we might be doing a prescribed burn the next day. Or we'd spend a couple weeks monitoring the diversity in our coastal grasslands and collecting native plant seeds, growing them in our nursery, planting them in restoration areas, and helping with large-scale heavy equipment restoration projects. And early in my career, once I got a permanent position as a resource ecologist, I was given the opportunity to look into creating management plans for coastal lagoon ecosystems and doing all of the background work on that, inventorying plants, animals, soils in the area. I've worked with researchers at Humboldt State University to develop plans to assess impacts of intensive recreation use on our coastal redwoods and our campgrounds, looking at compaction and intensive use around these big, beautiful trees. And Julie mentioned an oil spill that I helped implement some of the restoration work for, the Luckenbach, and before that, the Command. That work was focused on an endangered seabird called the marbled murrelet. And I spend a lot of my time working on the protection and the monitoring of it. I do dawn surveys in the morning for it in the forest, and I've done at-sea surveys for it. We were looking for ways to change park visitor behavior. And based on sociological studies, we looked at ways to update and improve our interpretive materials. And I developed a program called the Crumb Clean Campaign. For managing murrelets, I began what was both a scientific experiment and a management action. We call it conditioned taste aversion, training wild Steller's jays to avoid eating the eggs of these endangered seabirds. The department has trained me up to be a prescribed fire burn boss. I would never have ever guessed that one of the best parts of my work would be to reintroduce fire to the landscape. I get paid to light things on fire. It's been just over 20 years since I arrived here in Santa Cruz, and I spent my career working for California State Parks, and I truly believe in its mission and have really loved this variety, like the other women on this panel. That has been one of the best parts of this work. And while I don't work in a lab like you might picture when you think of a scientist, I can tell you that the natural resource management work that we do is guided by science. It's truly applied science. And as a final thought, I want to tell you that I'm excited about all of the wildfire and forest resilience work that's coming up. For the first time in my career, we actually are going to have the funding to accomplish truly large-scale work that will meet so many different goals. So with that, I'll kick it back to you, Angela.
Portia, thank you. I mean, what's just so the breadth of the work with the three of you, it's just I mean, it's astounding sort of hear all of the work that you're touching upon and all of the incredible impact that you have. What I would say is, we have a few questions in the chat box, which is reminding folks if they'd like to ask a question to just click on that button that says Q&A and drop us a line. And so I would love to sort of ask you all a couple of questions based on this conversation and a couple of the questions that have come up in the Q&A. Obviously you're all very accomplished and have had, incredible careers, but as we saw in the film, but also I think is experience lived by many, there have been challenges. And so, and I'll pull up two slides, if you don't mind, that I thought were really, really pretty incredible from the film. So the first is what was sort of termed almost like a gender bias iceberg, and So this is more for the folks in the audience who are thinking about these issues. I think it's a great slide that kind of gives you a sense of, the most obvious things are not the things that are the most sort of long-term difficult. But, so just for folks at awareness. And then the second slide, this I thought was such a striking, graph where you see, the number of women who are in STEM careers, really drops precipitously. They call it the leaky pipeline as you go through. And so, I'll just start off by saying, as three really wonderful and accomplished women, what have been some of your experiences either with the leaky pipeline or with some of these other kind of more difficult long-term questions? And have you seen, any folks really tackle those well, or, what have you been able to do within your teams? Because you're all leaders and, you're managers as well, thinking about these issues with the folks that you work with every day.
Well, I'd like to speak about the leaky pipeline part.
Yes, please.
So I think a really big leak in the pipeline comes from scientific workplaces not being sensitive to the needs of working mothers. And the first time that I really observed this was in graduate school, when a friend of mine became pregnant, and it wasn't a pregnancy that was planned. And after the baby was born, she felt like she really couldn't keep up with the demands of coursework and the intensive research in a competitive lab, as well as a newborn all at the same time. And so it upset her so much to do it, but she did leave the program and became a science teacher. But it was a really hard choice for her to make that call. But it's what felt right for her family, but it wasn't something that felt right for her at the time for her career. Absolutely. And I think if the career had been more supportive and able to work with her at the time, it's not something she would have done. And so that was really sad. But on the flip side of that leaky pipeline, some women are told that they have a choice to make, that they can either have their scientific careers or have a baby. And so they make the choice not to have children. And that particularly happens in academia with some of the institutions that are very rigorous towards getting tenure. And I definitely saw that time and time again when speakers would come for seminar series and they would tell us, yeah, I didn't have children. And it was because of my position. I had to make a choice. And so the pipeline didn't leak, but that's still a broken system when someone feels forced to make a choice based on a false dichotomy, or at least what should be one. And so that to me is a real shame that our system at least makes women feel like they have to make that kind of choice.
I would echo those comments. That was, when I think of a leaky pipeline, I have to say that I've sort of witnessed similar things, both during grad school and also within the state. I've seen many women struggle with, children and other family demands that carry a lot of it. And I think, the pandemic globally, has really illustrated this, where the impact has been disproportionately on women researchers early in their careers, that have younger children. So another factor, I think, in that leaky pipeline is lack of both peer support and institutional support. That for folks that watch the movie, those women scientists, they got the opposite of what they needed from their institutions and where they were. So I think peer networks and stronger mentorship for women early in their careers is really important to help them stay in spite of the hardships. So I think within the state and at CDFW, we do have a mentorship program that matches people more senior in their career with younger scientists, and I think that's a really strong thing. I also think that having a more systematic or formalized way for scientists early in their career, especially, to be able to network and communicate with each other and collaborate would be helpful as well.
It's interesting, Julie, you bring up the kind of building of the networks, and that's both from a mentorship perspective on either side. And a couple of questions have come in about seeking mentors and how women in science can kind of help support each other. So I love your answer on, just creating those peer networks. And so maybe turning that into a question for all of you, where have you felt supported? Where are those interventions that when you think back, thank goodness I had this person who helped talk to me or worked with me on this thing, or other examples that you've seen that I think are just really positive ones, or, challenging ones that the audience should sort of keep in mind.
I'd like to sort of touch on that. When I first attended our statewide natural resources managers training, they had all of the new folks stand up, and then they paired us all with an older member or an older environmental scientist who would be able to, answer questions. And so over the years, at least early in my career, I was able to connect with her to run through any issues I would have. She ended up offering me a job many years later, which was lovely, but just seeing that there were all of these people to pick from in terms of being able to look towards them for answers to troubles or questions we were having was really important for me.
Yeah.
So I think.
Oh, I'm sorry, Julie. Do you want to go?
Okay. I was just I was just going to comment on something that the scientist that was in Antarctica, her comment regarding mentorship. She said, I try to be the person that I needed when I was starting out, and that was a really strong statement to me, because for her it would have made, I think, all the difference to her when she was struggling with the hardship that she was faced with. So,
yeah. And I was going to mention, I really like that you mentioned the mentorship program at CDFW. And we also in our division have a mentorship program too. And I think that that's really helpful. It's not just for women, it's for women and men, but I think it gives a place for people to just have that someone that they can go to for support and to talk to about whatever they want to talk to. And that really helps, I think, to just know that you've got a person that you can talk to. Mm-hmm. And additionally, for our department, I think it really helps that we have really strong women leadership at the top. Like our director is a woman, and our chief deputy director is a woman, and seeing that really is very motivating and inspiring for us. Yeah.
I love that, and I think that's what's so interesting and such a challenge to me. From this was discussed in the film, but it's often it's hard sometimes to be visible, right? And so to your point, having women in those leadership positions, but also how we can promote and advocate and build up the great work that's happening. And I just found so stark that iceberg thing, and a lot of people are commenting it in the Q&A. One of the things is not getting credit, right? And so, not to put it in the negative, I actually want to turn that question around into a positive, to say, if you the three of you were to give credit to someone right now, or feel free to name multiple people, but using your platform today, who would you lift up who's either doing incredible work in the sciences, or is a great team member, or a great manager, or just a wonderful woman in science that you feel like is doing great work?
There's so many folks, excellent scientists I work with. I'll count out one manager though, for her work, I think, to really pioneer and kind of help blaze a pathway to make Oscar a good place for women to work, and that's Yvonne Adassi. She's an environmental program manager in OSPR. She oversees our preparedness program. But she has been a mentor for scientists throughout OSPR, and as well, reaching back to elementary school and college age young women who, and I think that's where a lot of our outreach and mentoring should start, really back in those much younger ages, to help encourage women and let them know what we do and let them know what's possible to inspire them. So and that's just one person of many that I cherish here.
It is so hard because you know that you're going to leave off names, and then so but I will speak to, I have a really great team for the Delta Smell Enclosure Project, and I get to work with a bunch of really super women on that team. And so I'd like to give personal shout outs to Nicole Kwan and Mallory Bedwell, Kat Pien, Haley Hudson, and Brittany Davis and Daphne Gill. They all work with me on that project, and I really appreciate their constant dedication to the project and how smart they are and how willing they are to give a hand and do no matter what needs to be done. We all work together on it. So do the men on that project. They do awesome too. But today's for women. So
yeah, and I second that, Melinda. It's really challenging to think of just one person in particular. But I want to mention Suzanne Goode, who is now retired, but an environmental scientist who worked in the Malibu area for her career and accomplished pretty incredible large-scale restoration projects. Most recently, I'm thinking of the Malibu Lagoon and restoring that coastal wetland ecosystem in light of a fair amount of opposition and sort of, staying afloat and above it all. And so seeing people accomplish things like that is a real inspiration. But again, there are so many more friends and colleagues that do incredible work.
No, absolutely. I think, I say we still have 17 minutes left on this. So if you guys think of more people, feel free to just pop them into the conversation as you think of them. But I will put you all on the spot for my last question, and then we'll throw some questions from the audience. I think, and this is also lifting up some of the themes, both from the film and in our Q&A, imposter syndrome. It's a real thing. I think all of us have been through it. So again, I'm going to turn this question around, and I'm going to say, I want you guys to speak to something you guys are really proud of in your career, and that kind of defies that little inner imposter that we all have and says, you know what, I kicked butt on this thing and I'm awesome scientist. So please give yourselves a shout out. I'd like each of you to give me an example.
We're also modest. Go ahead, Portia.
I mentioned it in my introduction, but one of the projects I've worked on is work to protect an endangered seabird called the marbled murrelet. And it's a complicated story about how to change park visitor behavior and help manage a bird that is very secretive and elusive and challenging. And based on a study also out of Humboldt with a sociologist looking at the success of our interpretive material and whether or not people were actually getting the message we were sending them. And after several years of work and lots of interviews and canvassing the public, it turned out that we weren't doing a very good job getting our message out there. And so with her recommendations, the sociologist's recommendations, we were able to update our interpretive materials. So it was very specific and pointed. And since then, that campaign has been used by quite a few of my colleagues in their districts. So keep it crumb clean as a way to help keep wildlife wild, that gives you a specific thing that you need to do, not feed animals, to help keep them wild. So it's like this simple thing, and it has a lot to do with interpretation and getting people to do certain things, but it is absolutely this applied science method that I have to say I'm pretty proud of.
So I guess what comes to mind, I guess, in my history with OSPR are a couple of areas that I was able to be involved with that, of course, involved many other scientists, and but I was able to sort of take part in my role as a supervisor or manager. One area is improving the rescue and care of wildlife following oil spills. You know, back in the old days, it used to be people with buckets and shovels out there, and wildlife often were not able to be cared for very well. I'm proud of the fact that, you know, OSPR and with the scientists we've had, the programs we've had, and our ability to work with our partners, the Oil Wildlife Care Network at UC Davis, you know, we've really brought wildlife rescue and care to a very high level. It's a globally recognized program, state of the art, where we really, you know, can maximize their survival and of the impacted wildlife, not just birds, mostly birds, but other wildlife species as well. The other area that I think OSPR has helped make great strides in is the area of natural resource damage assessment. So following a spill, we are responsible for measuring essentially all the natural resource impacts of the oil spill, and then pursuing monetary damages from the responsible party, and doing the right kinds of restoration to compensate the public essentially for the losses of those resources. And the development of the methodologies and the rigor that we can now put into these natural resource damage assessments, I think, is really astonishing. And we've been able to, along with federal and other state natural resource trustees, bring in, you know, hundreds of millions of dollars of restoration money to put on the ground in California and internationally, actually, because some of the species that we are restoring, you know, breed elsewhere and things. So anyways, those are a couple areas that I'm very proud of.
Okay. And for me, also, it was something that I'd mentioned in my opening part. It is the use of a new genetic technology that we're working with academic labs on, but I'm very proud of it because it was actually my husband that originally sent me a research article, and as soon as I saw it, I thought, oh my gosh, we could use this for ecology. And I love the idea of being able to transfer technology from one field into another. And so that's what we've been working on doing ever since. And it's something that a lot of us have heard of. It's CRISPR. So, but it's not the way that you usually hear of it. It's not gene editing. So we're not going to edit, you know, the different fish species or whatever. Instead, it's that we're going to be using it to be able to rapidly identify different fish species or even subspecies, and be able to do it in the field. So it basically means that you wouldn't necessarily need a geneticist to be able to do genetics as much anymore. You could have a fish biologist be out in the field, and they could get their genetic ID like right then within 20-30 minutes. And so we're super excited about this because it's going to really revolutionize the way that we do genetic ID for different species coming up. And so we're just super excited about what this could mean for the future of how we do genetic monitoring for not only DWR, but for other agencies and departments as well.
Well, huge congrats to the three of you. I think you named some just incredible wins. And actually, there's already been a comment that someone was out camping in Gold Bluffs Beach and saw the Keep It Crumb Clean plaque on the picnic table. So Portia, shout out already. And Melinda and Julie too. I mean, just really wonderful. So thank you. So in the last 9 minutes, we're going to take some more questions. I know folks have been popping in, so just remember to click on that Q&A button at the bottom, and I'll take a couple more questions. So looking over this, and I love this question because I feel like this is emblematic of all of us, but someone, looking at the trailer says that it reminds them of a quote that is attributed to many folks called, "Well-behaved women rarely make history." And for all of you on the panel, what does this quote spark for you? Have you had to feel like you had to fight and be a troublemaker to get where you are today? And I'll just add a little bit from somebody else's question, and what kind of trouble would you recommend a young woman scientist make in the beginning of her career as she's sort of making her way through the world?
This reminds me of
Does anyone
the
want
idea of being. Oh, can you hear me?
Go ahead, Portia. Yes.
Go ahead.
As I've been thinking about this subject over the last couple of weeks, it's the idea of being bossy that comes out most in my mind. And I can't tell you the number of times I've been described as being bossy by both men and women. Now, I own that. Probably comes from being, a big sister to five little siblings, right? The same thing goes for aggressive, though. These are descriptors that aren't usually used to describe men. Men are called assertive. They're said that they have command presence, or they're a leader. And I have a colleague who said that I was described to her as being an alpha female prior to us being introduced. So perhaps it would be hard to get along, with me. And, since then we've become good friends. And when I told her about this discussion today, she reminded me of it. And just this idea that language matters, that we need to train ourselves about how we talk about others, even, us women talking about other women. And that we need to call each other out on it and in helpful ways, as opposed to denigrating someone. But that idea of being a boss as opposed to a leader.
So I think that Portia and I have sort of opposite personalities and characteristics somewhat. I'm an introvert and I'm a quiet person. So I think navigating through situations where you do have to speak up and be able to communicate, I think has been challenging in the past. I mean, when I started out in CDFW, I'd be in many meetings where I was the only woman in the room, and it can be intimidating. So I found that staying true to your science, your truth, and you figure out how to say what has to be said, and you strive to be a good scientist. I found all those things sort of help me navigate through some of those challenges.
And I think I might be right in between you two, because I also believe I'm an introvert, but almost no one else believes it of me. Because I think what it is I've learned, even though I'm truly an introvert, I know it, but I've learned at work to just push through it and get said what I need to get said, and be vocal, because my voice must be heard, and I will make it heard. And so I'm a different person in different settings, I think, is what happens to me. And so like when I have to give a talk or when I'm in a meeting, I'm very different than I would be at home. And so yeah, I guess I just wear different faces for different situations. And I do believe that, yeah, I definitely, like that opening line, like none of us wanted to be troublemakers, which was in the film. Same for me. I don't want to be a troublemaker. but I do want to get my work done, and I'm going to get it done. And I'm not going to let somebody stop me from getting it done. So I'll do what has to be done. Yeah.
I love it. All that good trouble. But I think it's a truism of life. We have to be true, and I think this was also said by one of the scientists. To rely on the data. The data shows that that we're moving in the right direction. So let's go. So don't be afraid of being bossy, and don't be afraid of showing the data and sticking by it. So I love all of these ideas. So I know we just have a couple minutes left to our panel, and so I just want to I'll let the panelists give a thought to maybe how they would want to close, or any last thoughts for the group. And I know, we've got some really wonderful questions in here about all sorts of advice, or, some of the challenges, but, I'd love to end us on this, idea of the future, and, where science is going, and what, your and other women's contribution can be. And so, I'll make you all sort of predict the future a little bit here. Where are we going? What's on the horizon? What's exciting to you? In all of the different facets of your lives, not just you as a scientist, or you as a woman, or you as a, whatever other, identifying principles we have, but, just looking forward, what's on the horizon. So I will have us go in reverse order with how we were introduced. So we'll start with Portia.
All right, thanks. I think that my hope is that we continue to have these discussions, that we continue to look at our culture. And as I think about how we all got here, and this idea of colonial culture, manifest destiny, to own, to conquer, to take. And, if you look at the last few years and the Me Too movement, and the idea of consent, and Black Lives Matter, and our work on anti-racism, I think that these are difficult conversations, but necessary. And I reviewed a budget recently from one of our partners who work in our parks, college kids. And it included kind of a sizable chunk on diversity, equity, inclusion training. And I thought, yeah, that's where we need to go. And we need to continue to build systematic cultural change. And I think it starts with trainings like that at our universities and earlier. So that's what I'll leave you on. It's a difficult conversation, but we need to keep having it.
Thank you, Portia. Julie.
Well, in terms of kind of workplace, I'm optimistic. I think that after having been here for 20 years, I can say definitively things are better. They're improving all the time in terms of an environment for women science, for diverse scientists, right? Which is what we all want to see that. In terms of science in general, it's kind of an interesting time. I think it's kind of pivotal for the importance of science in society right now, because we have things like a pandemic, we have climate change, we have big existential crises that are only going to be solved with science. And I think the public and governments and societies eyes are being opened to the importance of science and for the future of humans, our existence. So I think it's going to be a unifying theme, I think, going forward for society. Women are half of that equation. Half of the best scientists are going to be women. So yeah, I'm hopeful.
Thank you, Julie. Melinda.
Yeah, but largely what I want us to do moving forward is just to continue to build those collaborative bridges with, interdisciplinary work. I think you're right. These are like crazy hard questions that are coming up with, the climate change and things like that. And we do need women, and we do need men, and we need creative thinkers, and we need everybody to come together to solve these things. And when you build these divides about what someone looks like or somebody's gender or anything, it is getting in the way of people doing their jobs and taking away from the productivity that we need to focus on these issues, not that stuff. Let's focus on the work, the critical work that we need to get done. And so instead, I would say, like, let's build people up and let's come together and let's figure out how to give people the resources and the flexibility that they need to be able to do their work. So more flexible work schedules, whatever people need to build that work-life balance and get the support and feel like they can do what they need to do, and then they will produce for you. And I think our agency has shown that people come together during times of trouble and really do show you the best of themselves very often.
Thank you, Melinda. Well, such inspiring words and such inspiring stories from all three of you. So thank you for joining us here today. And I will say, my last thought is this is, I hope, the first of many conversations for our agency. And so I welcome all of you being a part of that, and all the folks who joined. Thank you for spending, an hour with us. But I feel like we barely scratched the surface on so many of these issues. And so it's so incumbent on us to keep that conversation going in many different spaces in many different ways. And so you have my commitment, but I know you have the commitment of our three panelists and all of the teams that they represent to sort of move forward with these ideas and thoughts. And I'm really excited for the future too, when it comes to, that there was a quote about how, if half the women or, 3/4 of the women are missing, we're missing 3/4 of the great ideas. And so I'm really excited to get to that 100%, because things like climate change, like you say, or protecting species in a changing climate, or, doing the really hard work of bringing communities together around environmental issues. We're not going to do that, without some creativity, without a lot of luck, and everyone's best ideas. And so, I look forward to working with all of you on that, and thank you. And then I'll just give a quick shout out. We have a next speaker series on March 24th, which I just want to give everybody a little bit of a parting words with. But thank you, Melinda. Thank you, Julie. And thank you, Portia. And thank you for joining us. It was a huge pleasure. And have a wonderful day. Happy Friday.